How well do you respond to feedback? If you're like me and perhaps most people, the mere concept of getting feedback immediately starts to bubble up some not so pleasant emotions. That could be because of the uncertainty around what that feedback might be. That could be because of the assumption that at least some of that will be negative feedback. But no matter how you currently think about and respond to feedback, it's undeniable that feedback itself is a huge component of life. And in the book, Thanks for the Feedback, Douglas Stone and Sheila Heen help us get better at receiving it. This is a book not about giving feedback, but receiving it well. And in this video, I'd like to sketch out some of the ideas that stood out to me from that book. When it comes to those emotional reactions that you might have in response to any piece of feedback, the authors identify these three helpful categories. The first they call truth triggers. This is that gut reaction that you have when you feel like the content of whatever feedback you receive simply isn't true. It's wrong. And maybe you feel wronged in response. The second category is relationship triggers. And these responses have to do with the relationship that you have to the giver of feedback. The feedback is colored by what you believe about the giver or how you feel treated by the giver, as well as what you feel about the relationship between the two of you. And the third category is identity triggers. These hit at your sense of who you are, and they challenge it. What I found helpful about this breakdown is that it gets you to start thinking about and even feeling into your emotional responses to feedback, to perhaps identify why it is you have the particular emotional response that's cropping up. Is something you believe being challenged? Is there something about the relationship that feels a bit messy? Or is there some piece of your core identity that's being challenged? So ramping up your awareness of how you respond to feedback, I think, is one of the first steps in achieving the goal of this book, which is simply to engage skillfully in the conversation. These triggers are obstacles that get in the way of that. In addition to being aware of your emotional response, it's also helpful to examine what type of feedback you're actually receiving. Here we find another trio of coaching as one category of feedback, where the purpose is to help someone learn, grow, or change. Evaluation is a second category of feedback, which involves some sort of assessment or ranking or letting you know where you stand. And the third category of feedback is appreciation. Saying thank you, I see you, and I know how hard you're working. One difficulty that can arise in any sort of situation that involves giving and receiving feedback, think perhaps about your work environment, your boss, your coworkers. It's easy for what the authors call cross transactions to take place, where perhaps what you want is coaching, but the only thing you're getting is evaluation. Or maybe the other way around. You don't really feel like you want coaching right now. You first just need to know where you stand. So similar to how those three categories of triggers help you identify why you're maybe responding to feedback in the way that you are, these three categories of feedback help you to see, first of all, how general the term feedback is, and also maybe identify what it is that you're not getting but you need. Is there a healthy balance of these three types of feedback? One way you might get to that balance is having a conversation about mirrors, the type of mirror that the feedback giver might hold up. The authors compare a supportive mirror, where the feedback generally has this tone of encouragement and support, versus an honest mirror, where the feedback giver is encouraged to describe the situation exactly as they see it. Both of these mirrors are useful. As the receiver, sometimes you need that supportive mirror. Other times it's that honest mirror that's going to give you the feedback you need to take certain steps forward in your life. But as the giver, it's pretty hard to jump to that honest mirror. So having a conversation about it, and maybe even as the receiver, giving the giver permission to be an honest mirror, is worth doing sometimes. Another component of feedback conversations, as you think about some past set of actions or interactions, is how big of a gap there potentially is between your understanding of that situation and the other person's. How there can be blind spots between how you see yourself and how others see you. And the authors identify a handful of blind spot amplifiers, one of which is impact versus intent. We tend to judge ourselves based on our intentions. Other people tend to judge us by our impact. Both are relevant, both are important, but they are separate things, which is why the author suggests that you talk about each individually. Have a conversation about intentions, and then have a conversation about impact. That can help both parties get a more holistic view of the situation. One common pitfall of feedback conversations looks something like this. One person takes the conversation down a particular track. An example they give is a man who buys his wife roses, despite the fact that on multiple occasions she has stated that she doesn't like nor does she want to receive roses, with the feedback being, "You don't listen to me." Instead of addressing that feedback, the husband tries to take it in a different direction, saying, "You don't appreciate me. Look, I just got you flowers." That's an example of switch tracking, where one person in the conversation, intentionally or unintentionally, veers off in a new direction. The suggestion here is to maintain kind of a high-level perspective of the conversation, notice when it starts to veer off in a new direction, and use signposting to say something like, "Okay, I hear you bringing up this topic here, which I do want to address, but first, let's finish this discussion about the topic we started with." And that type of meta conversation is probably one of the hardest things to do in a feedback conversation, but also one of the most valuable. Paying attention to the different threads of the conversation and making sure you don't get off track. Anytime a relationship is part of the feedback dynamic, those threads can get even more intertwined, not just the threads of the conversation, but also the wider threads of the relationship itself. And here the author suggests that you identify the relationship system, recognizing that each of you are part of the problem, and each of you only sees part of the problem. They suggest this 3-step back approach where first you identify the you and me intersections. How are each of your personalities or tendencies playing off of each other? Then a second step back to look at the roles that you each play in the relationship. And then a third step back to look at the big picture. Who are the other players? What are the other processes? What's the role of the environment? Having that type of systems view of a relationship is one of those things like intentions and impact that helps you get a more holistic view of the situation and help you see together how you'd like to move forward. When it comes to identity triggers, the authors encourage you to learn how your wiring and temperament affect your story. One way you can do that is to sketch out this well-being curve for yourself by thinking about how you typically respond to feedback, understanding that you'll have some baseline to your overall sense of well-being that will increase in response to positive feedback, but decrease in response to negative feedback. And how it's worth paying attention to the duration of that bump in well-being or dip in well-being, and it's likely that the dip will last longer than the bump, as well as how big that swing up and the swing down is. That's a way of getting to know your typical response pattern, which I think can be helpful both for you individually to recognize that that's how you respond to feedback, and it might also be worth bringing up in your important relationships so that they know how you respond to feedback. Recognizing that your current response pattern isn't fixed. There's a whole chapter on dismantling distortions, those ways in which you exaggerate feedback in a way that makes the dip lower and longer than it maybe needs to be. One technique within that realm is this concept of giving yourself a second score. The first score is the feedback itself on your latest work project, on how you handled that challenging situation at home, and it might not be great. The second score, which the authors encourage you to pay just as much attention to, is how you respond to that feedback. Do you reject the feedback outright, or do you explore it? Explore what it brings up in you. Explore the broader situation to understand how truthful the feedback is. The first score is something that you can't control. The second one, you can, at least in part. So make that second score that you give yourself a part of your identity, as opposed to the first score. And as much as this book is about receiving feedback well, it's not about letting every single person into your emotional life and allowing them to do whatever they want. Here they bring in an idea from Anne Lamott, that we're each born with an emotional acre, and you get to choose who to let in, and that you can, in fact, set boundaries around that space, and how establishing limits on the feedback you get is crucial both to your own well-being and to the well-being of the relationship. Some examples they give of what those boundaries might sound like: I may not take your advice, or I don't want feedback about that subject, not right now. Or even going so far as, stop or I'm going to leave this relationship. And in the setting of any particular boundary, there is the opportunity to both show appreciation to the feedback giver as appropriate and being firm in the boundary you set. And they specifically encourage to use the word and as opposed to but, so that you get both of those things across. I appreciate your concern, and I'm choosing to do things this way. As I look at these ideas here and think about the decade or so that I've been putting my creative work out on YouTube, the 3 years that I've been married, the 1.5 years that I've been a dad, it's so easy to see how big of a role my response to feedback has in my life. And I think this book has made a big difference in helping me respond well to feedback. There are a whole lot of ideas and strategies that I didn't have the space to explore here. So if you've enjoyed what I've shared, I encourage you to go pick up the book yourself. And if you enjoy this visual way of working with ideas, that's the skill that I teach at verbaltovisual.com. So if you'd like to learn how to sketch out the ideas in the next book you read, go check out those resources. And if you're not already, subscribe here on YouTube to see some more sketched goodness of whatever books I dig into next. Thank you so much for watching. Talk to you again soon.